There's nothing better than you. So true. Big city lawyer went duck hunting in rural Mississippi. He shot and dropped a bird, but it fell into the farmer's field on the other side of the fence. So the lawyer did what most of us would do. He started climbing over the fence to retrieve his bird. But about that time, the farmer drove up on his tractor and asked, "What are you doing?" "Well," he says, "I shot this duck. It fell into your field, and I'm retrieving it." Farmer says, "No way. It's on my property. You can't have the duck. It's mine." Lawyer says, "Sir, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. I'm the best trial lawyer in New York City. If you don't let me have my duck, I'm going to sue you for everything you have." Well, the farmer says, "Now listen, we settle things a little differently out here in the country. We have what's called the Mississippi 3-kick rule." The lawyer says, what exactly is that?" Farmer says, "I get to kick you 3 times as hard as I can. Then you kick me as hard as you can 3 times, and we just keep going until someone gives up." The lawyer sized up the farmer and thought, "You know what? I think I can take this old man. Bring it on." So he says, "Okay, let's give it a whirl." So the farmer came up with his steel-toed boots, kicked the lawyer as hard as he could in his shin, dropped him to his knees, almost brought tears to his eyes. Then he kicked the lawyer in the stomach with all his force, nearly wiped him out. Then with his toes, steel-toed boots, kicked him right in the face, almost knocked him unconscious. Lawyer finally managed to stand up, weaving and wobbling around, and said, "All right, old man, now it's my turn." Farmer says, "Nah, I give up. You can have the duck." I don't think that's proper for a preacher to laugh at that, but I'm glad you did. It is pretty funny. Have you ever been in a situation where someone antagonized you, someone baited you? Ever been driven to the point of total frustration by a supervisor, by an employee, by a coworker? Whether you work at a restaurant, a factory, a school, an office, a church, home, sometimes the workplace is filled with labor pains. Today we'll discover God's perspective on how we should treat an employer, how we should treat employees, how we should treat coworkers. And the principles are great because they apply to all of our relationships, but of course we're in a work series, so we're going to make the application to our jobs. First question of the 3 that we need to ask and answer is, how should we treat our employers? And the answer is, we must respect them. Ephesians 6. "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not men, because you know that the Lord will reward everyone for whatever good he does, whether he is slave or free." Now, in the New Testament world, slavery was such an ingrained part of society and life, few ever contemplated the morality of it, whether it was right or wrong. It was just considered an economic and practical necessity of everyday living. When one nation conquered another, the conquered nation became the slaves of the conquerors. Well, today, the closest thing we have to this master-slave kind of a relationship is an employer-employee relationship. And the great thing is, many of the Bible's principles are fully and completely transferable. Take, for instance, I want to share with you 4 ways that we can demonstrate respect to our employers. First, we need to keep our promises. Keep our promises. In Psalm 15, the question is asked, who may dwell in the Lord's sanctuary? In other words, who can dwell in his presence? And verse 4b gives one answer. It says, one who keeps an oath even when it hurts and does not change their mind. Now, it can be hard to find someone these days who will keep their word. A pro athlete signs a multi-million-dollar contract, has a great couple of years, and then announces, you know what, I'm not going back to the football field until my contract gets renegotiated. He didn't keep his promise. The divorce rate shows someone is not keeping their word. When a contractor underbids a job and then walks off of that job unfinished, he didn't keep his word. Or maybe a teenager stays up way too late Friday night and then calls in and doesn't show up for their job on Saturday. They didn't keep their promise. So one of the marks of respect in respecting our employers is keeping the promises that we make. Another one is meeting deadlines. Proverbs 18 says this, "One who is slack in his work is brother to one who destroys." That's a pretty serious verse. Missing deadlines without a reason cripples the work of the organization. Jobs aren't completed, schedules aren't interrupted, delays happen, people are delayed, the timing is thrown off, morale gets, put in the trash can, everyone suffers. So we need to hit our deadlines if we're going to demonstrate respect to our employers. But also, we need to work without supervision, which that Ephesians scripture that we read kind of details that. Maybe you've heard this statement, "Don't worry about that, the boss will never know." Well, for the Christian, the boss always knows is because the boss is always in. We work for Jesus, and he knows and he sees everything. But when it comes to our employer, we can work independently without our supervisor always having to check whether or not we've actually completed and done our job. Fourth, we need to control costs. Listen to Luke 16. "So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches?" That's a great sentence. That is amazing what Jesus just said. He makes a comparison between worldly wealth and true riches. Boy, there's a sermon in there somewhere. "And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own?" Now, as employees, we are managers. We're managing the assets of another. We're stewards. The money, the property, the equipment, it belongs to the company. It's not ours. In fact, if we want to chase it further, it belongs to the Lord because everything belongs to God. So our job, and when we go and we work for an employer, is to help control costs and kind of help them become profitable. So why, as Christians, do we do these things for our employer? Why should we be concerned about keeping our promises? Why should we be concerned about meeting deadlines or working without supervision or controlling costs? Because of 1 Timothy 6. "All who are under the yoke of slavery should consider their masters worthy of full respect, so that God's name and our teaching may not be slandered." We work as if Jesus is our boss because he is. We don't want to give Jesus a black eye, a bad name. We refuse to be lazy. We refuse to cut corners. We refuse to show up late or to leave early or take too long of a lunch break or, violate company policies so that the world sees our witness to God and his name. And in some respects, maybe even become a Christian too. So the second question is this: how are we to treat our employees? And the answer is we must respect our employees, Ephesians 6. "And masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no favoritism with him." Now, this one might catch us a little off guard. I mean, it's understandable that employees treat their managers with respect. But what's this about respecting people who actually report to you? I mean, this is where our faith causes us to kind of look at the world from a different perspective than the world's perspective. Now, it's easy to understand respect for the person above us. They've got a bigger title, they make more money, they're better well known. But Christians are called to value all people. Everyone has worth and is worthy of respect regardless. It doesn't matter whether you are a janitor or the president of the United States, you are made in the image of God and you're worthy of respect. And so here are 3 ways that we can demonstrate respect to our employees. First, we need to be the example, not the exception. Being the example, not the exception. Enron became synonymous for the abuse of power. According to documents back in the early 2000s, we actually can see the fact that those top executives actually made $164 million. And so what they were doing was they were refusing to pay their employees, and they were refusing to take care of their retirement obligations for those employees, and they just lined their own pockets, and we know what happened. What happened was the company went bankrupt. I believe it was in 2004. We got slide issues too, Eric. That's why I had to grab my notes right here, because there's a lot of good things that I want to say, and I don't want to miss it. Well, the second thing that we need to do is we need to treat our people fairly. Just go ahead and reboot the whole thing. We need to treat our people fairly. James 5:4, which you cannot see on the screen, but it says this: "Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty." Now, this verse teaches us against withholding wages. It's not only illegal, it's immoral. But do you think that God really cares about the executives in a company who are milking that company at the expense of their employees to where their employees receive absolutely nothing? I think he is concerned about that. The third thing that we can do is we can encourage honesty. We need to find ways to reinforce what people are doing well and let them know that they are doing well. We don't want to be like the father whose son comes up to him and say, "Dad, let's play some darts. I'm going to throw," and you just say, "Wonderful." Okay, we don't want to be like that. Not everything is wonderful, and so we need to have honesty. Do you remember the time when Lucy put her, and I had this slide up here too that has this quote, but she puts her hand on her hip and she says this about Charlie Brown. She says, "Charlie Brown, you are a foul ball in the line drive of life. You are a miscue. You are 3 putts on the 18th green. You are a 7-10 split in the 10th frame. You are a missed free throw, a shanked 9-iron, and a called third strike." I mean, she didn't hold anything back when she just lit him up. Now, God holds employees accountable to have integrity, but God also holds employers accountable to have integrity and respect. So that kind of brings us to the third question. How are we to treat our coworkers? And what's amazing is the answer is exactly the same, with respect. Our guys are so good, they got it up and running. Here's the verse of Scripture. "Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends upon you, live at peace with everyone." So here are 4 ways that we can actually demonstrate respect to our coworkers. We need to be cooperative. Have you ever worked for a company where one department is working against another? There's one division who's working against another division. Same company, same team, should be the same goals, but they are working divided. It can happen in our schools, it can happen in our homes, it can happen in our churches, it can happen in our places of business. How much more could be, accomplished? How much better would our productivity be if we could just all work towards a common cause? And so one of the ways that we can demonstrate respect to our coworkers is to be cooperative. The second is to avoid pride. God calls us to be humble, but we usually don't really understand what that means. C.S. Lewis said, "Humility is not thinking less of yourselves. Humility is thinking of yourself less." And so we need to avoid pride. Third, we need to resist revenge. There's an old comedy episode, now this goes back not decades, but maybe generations, to Andy and Amos and Andy. There's an episode where Andy just keeps slapping Amos in the chest until one day Amos has endured enough, and he decided that he was going to fix Andy once and for all. So he showed a friend some explosives that he tied to his chest underneath his jacket. And he proudly announced, "The next time Andy slaps me on the chest, he's going to blow his hand off." Well, poor Amos hadn't really thought through the implications of getting revenge. Revenge is always more damaging to you than it is to the other person. So it needs to be resisted. Fourth, we need to seek peace. I'm convinced some employees, some family members, they just aren't happy unless something is brewing. There's always got to be drama. Some people just can't live without controversy. When President George W. Bush was actually the governor of Texas, he came into office at a time of great difficulty, and the legislature was actually run by the opposing party. Well, he met very early with the majority leader of the other party in hopes that they would be able to reduce the conflict and have cooperation and work in unity. Well, rumor has it that the meeting, completed and there wasn't anything accomplished. There was nothing that the two could build on. And at the meeting's end, George W. Bush grabbed his political enemy and planted a big kiss on the man's cheek. The red-faced man, he stammered and he said, "Why did you do that?" And George W. Bush said, "Well, if I can't get your cooperation, at least I'm going to get a kiss." Now, those two men burst into laughter. And after that, they said that it ended a lot of their conflict between the two of them, and it began a new friendship. Now, I do not recommend that you trying that tomorrow at work. I am not suggesting that you go into work and start kissing your coworkers. That's going to lead to a lot of other problems, and you're probably going to need to get bailed out of jail from the preacher. But what I am encouraging you to do is find a way to communicate that you want to work in peace. Now, why do we demonstrate respect to our employees? Why do we demonstrate respect to our employers? Why do we demonstrate respect to our coworkers? The reason is so that people will listen to what we live. They will listen to how we live. They will listen to what we say about Jesus. We do these things so that he gets the credit and the glory for our lives. It's not about what I can do, what you can do. It's not even really about what we can do. It's about what he can do. And we want to have the opportunity in our workplaces, in our everyday lives, to share Jesus with the people that are a part of our world. And so I pray that you will truly look at your own life and say, how can I demonstrate respect through my relationships so that God receives